Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So once again, it is time for one of our favorite parts of the game, the challenge tournament. So this time it is Fire Knights featuring champions from the Corrupted Alliance. Now, for those of you who do not know, the Corrupted Alliance is a group of the factions, and it is Demon Spawn, Undead Hordes, Dark Elves, and Night Rev. The tournament itself is already live, so we can see the rewards. There's no Void Shard this time, unfortunately. However, the top reward, which is some Immortal Soul Essence, which is pretty decent, to be fair, for those of us in the end game at least. But 1800 is fairly generous. So normally this is 2100, so it's a little bit cheaper than normal. And this can be a quite difficult challenge because it is Fire Knight, and Fire Knight has the combination of needing some way to get through the waves or survive the waves, and some way to deal with the boss himself. But again, if there's ever not a Void Shard at the top here, then there's always the chance here to get the 6-star epic Relentless gear and potentially some 6-star rare gear. So placing 1 through 4 is a very, very good spot to be. As you can see, done some test runs. I'm already 4th. Well, I did a lot of testing yesterday, but I've done some runs to get below the energy cap today. But I intend to compete somewhat hard. I'll see where it shakes out over the next 2 days. So now let's talk about what stage you should be farming this on. For starters, let's completely ignore the presence of hard mode. This is way too difficult for a challenge tournament of this caliber, so let's stick to normal mode first of all. Stage 25 will give you the best gear quality amongst all of these stages, the normal stages. Stage 20 will give you the best points per energy spent, so it's more energy efficient to do stage 20. And if you're struggling to get to stage 20 or you're not there, you're more in the earlier or the mid game, then stage 16 would be the place to go, where you still get decent amount of rewards, chances at 6-star gear, and it's void, so you don't have to worry about all the affinity issues that we might discuss later, and it's just much easier because it's a lower stage. So any of those 3 in the normal modes will suffice. In my case though, I developed a team for both stage 25 and stage 20. So let's start with the stage 25 team. We have Mithrala in the lead here, providing mostly the buffs and the cleanse, but also the Hex is a form of like tertiary CC. We have Tomb Lord in here, triple hitter on the A1 and AoE poison, so really, really strong. We have Dark Gale in here, predominantly to pop the poisons on the boss, but he also has a triple hitter on the A1, which is really good. Allure, as you'd expect, the queen of Fire Knight turn meter control. So Allure has a triple hitter on the A1, and she can reduce turn meter, one of the, I think, the best single target turn meter control champions in the game. And this might shock a lot of people, but we have Vlad the Nightborn in here, who is filling a role where I wanted a nuker for the waves, but I also wanted some form of CC. Now in this case, mine is actually unbooked, believe it or not, but even though it's like a 75% chance to place block active skills, it seems to work more often than not, and this team is yet to fail. However, if for some reason it doesn't work eventually, and then like one of the Gnarlhorns gets his unkillable off, then I might just switch to stage 20, just because I know that's a lot quicker and a lot more reliable. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this for you guys. It's been taking somewhere between 4 and 5 minutes, so it is definitely not a quick run. So this is not necessarily a recommendation to use this team in particular. And like I said, I'm probably just gonna run it until it, maybe if it fails, it might not. But I'd like to get the best gear I can, but if all else fails, then I'm definitely just going to swap down to, or drop down to stage 20 because it's just easier. So looks like Vlad placed 3 block active skills, so we don't have to worry about Nethril, one of the Gnarlhorns, and one of the Siege Breakers. I forget. He's like a rare champion, the Spirit guy. So you can kind of see Mithrala at work here doing hexing. So we got a 1 petrification buff there. Vlad also has another AoE where he can place Leech and steal some turn meter if there's certain factions, or just decrease turn meter, which is also useful on the Fire Knight himself. Dark Gale in there is extending some debuffs. He's really there for the backup decrease attack in case Tomb Lord gets resisted on the A3, because I have him to just use it once and never again. So just in the rare case that gets resisted, in addition to one of them not getting CC'd, then, you know, Nethril could really, really hurt us and kill somebody, so I don't want that to happen ever. And so we have Dark Gale using his A2 to place decrease attack as a backup. We have Allure in there doing her A1, just random turn meter control here and there. And of course, Dark Gale can also pop the poisons that Tomb Lord places, or he himself places. Well, I have Dark Kael open with the A3 and turn it off. And so he only places his poisons one time because Tomb Lord can handle it for the rest of the fight. So this wave, yep, takes about 90-ish seconds. So that's pretty on par. I would say 4.5 minutes is kind of the median time. And so I'd expect that to be the case here. And so each wave, as you can mathematically put together, takes about 90 seconds, including the boss stage. So this time we've got another set of three block active skills. So we don't have to worry about Netheril again. And Netheril is probably the most annoying and the most likely to slow down the run, just because if he gets a turn, he might land some stuns. The Gnarlhorn provoking on wave 1 isn't as bad, just because they just A1 for a turn, which is not bad compared to missing a turn where we're missing out on damage or some ability. So this is kind of the better result, actually. So Vrask isn't that scary unless he happens to crit and he heals his team. It can be somewhat annoying, but for the most part he doesn't. If Vlad dies for some reason during the waves, he's not really that essential on the boss phase himself. He's just kind of a little bit of extra damage. But as long as he like that, he can put himself under the veil so he can kind of hide, and then they'll target a lore if they do get a turn at all. But he also places the leech so he can heal himself. And just a couple AoEs, and just like that, he's back up to full HP. So kind of a sleeper champion. After the buff, he is really, really good. So definitely don't forget. Don't forget about Vlad, old Void Fusion. And yeah, after the buff with the double AoE, now that he has AoE decreased defense, very, very, very solid, particularly for Undead Horde Faction Wars. So there we go, about 3 minutes. Now we're on to the boss phase here. So here I have everyone just use their A1 so they can get down the 12 hits on the shield. And so Vlad will break it, but if he didn't, Mithril would break it. So it doesn't really matter if Vlad's dead. So we have Tomb Lord debuffing, and Lore starts return meter control. Vlad can do whatever, and then eventually, I think on his third turn, Tomb Lord will start to place, or will place the decreased speed, assuming there's actually enough room. Sometimes it takes a bit just because there's too many poisons on there. There we go, 10th buff, or 10th debuff. So at this point, we're in full control of the Fire Knight. He will never ever get a turn. He has decreased speed. We have a very fast allure, about like 250 speed to keep his turn meter down. And then we just slowly wait for Dark Kael to pop all the poisons. So he's in a Relentless set, as you can see. So he's going to take as many extra turns as he wants. And ideally, he just keeps popping the poisons and just speeds this up. That's kind of one of the variables as well. So like in the waves... In the wave, some of the variables are just, you know, do we land the CC? Do we not? How many turns do the enemies get? Are they petrified? Do they take less damage? And then on the boss, it's like how many poisons does Kael pop at once, and how many extra turns does he get? How many poisons are on there, etc. So I can, oh, there we go. See, there you go. Double turn right there and pops them for the end. So yeah, so somewhere around 4.5 minutes is usually how long this team in particular takes. Now for the other team for stage 20, I went a little bit more greedy just because this stage is a lot easier for myself at least. So we have this team here. So Mithril stays in because we are bringing in Rule the Huntmaster because we want to use the Hex to power up his nukes. We have Drexthar in, surprisingly, because he is a decently hard-hitting defense-based nuker, and so that also pairs well with Mithril. We have Lydia as our primary debuffer, and then we have Coldart in here as the win condition when we get to the boss. So obviously, as you can see here, we do not have an allure, and that's because in this case, we're relatively fast enough between Lydia and the Cold Heart, who's in a reflex set, to keep the turn meter down and also just nuke the boss. This is stage 20, so we don't necessarily have to worry about the less turn meter reduction and less cap on the enemy max HP, so that can be very useful. We missed a Hex on Errol there, that's why he didn't die instantly to the rural nuke with the Hex. But we have the AI set so that Drexthar saves his provoke for wave 2. Oh, only landed 2, that's unfortunate. But yeah, we're using the natural cooldowns here. I tried a couple of compositions with like a Renegade and resetting and stuff, and it was actually slower trying to force them to reset and whatnot. So this is stage 20, so I don't think anyone's going to die. The arrow can hit hard, but not hard enough. And we have enough buffs from Mithril to kind of keep us protected. So we do have, I have Lydia open with her A3 just for the double hitter, Mithril A1, Cold Heart gets the 4 hits, and Drexthar pops the shield. That's perfect sync every time. Sometimes Rule lends decreased defense there, which is kind of nice, But yep, Heartseeker number 1 kind of goes in. We have the mastery for reducing turn meter on A1s on a lot of champions here, so that can kind of buy time for Cold Heart to get her Heartseeker back. Ruel does a little bit of nuking here, and Drexler can place a little bit of the burns, but again, we don't really want the Fire Knight to take a turn. He is capable of doing so depending on the number of reflex procs that happen for Cold Heart, so it's not a guarantee, but in that case we got one, and basically this fight is over by the time she gets the second Heartseeker, because again, there's no cap on enemy max HP, so we don't have to worry about that. And even if he does get a turn, which has happened a couple of times in the testing, it wasn't really that bad. Again, we have Mithrala protecting us with a lot of her buffs and the shield and whatnot, so we just pop the shield, break it down again, and then once the second Heartseeker goes out, the fight's basically over. So as you can see, this team is closer to the 90-second to 2-minute mark for stage 20. It works pretty well. If I had like a Kymar, I think I could probably run a reset type team a little bit better, but just the Renegade and the particular speed she's at right now on my account just did not work smoothly, I should say. It didn't work smoothly, and then we didn't have enough abilities ready for wave 2 to do it cleanly. So it actually took longer, believe it or not, trying to do all the reset stuff. So for the champions that I used in today's video, I'll show you a little bits of their gear and stats here. So we have Mithrala, Lifebane here. Total stats, we got 57k on the HP, just under 4k on the defense, 261 on the speed, and 575 on the accuracy with 200 resistance. And I know I usually don't show the masteries on my champions, so I'm gonna make sure that I try to do that now. So these are Mithrala's masteries. Next up, I do have my Lydia, the Death Siren, and a smattering of gear here. Total stats are 57k on the HP, almost 3,500 on the defense, 269 on the speed, which is precise for Demon Lord Clan Boss, 470 on the resistance, and 371 on the accuracy. Her masteries are as such. Next, old Drexy in a lifesteal set and perception. His total stats here are basically 39,000 on the HP, 4,200 on the defense, 215 on the speed, full crit rate, 206 on the crit damage, and 359 on the accuracy. His masteries here, it's partially complete because I really didn't need that last one, but I made sure to get him sniper, but Giant Slayer on him. Next up, we do have my first Reflex Cold Heart with a perception set as well. 37k on the HP, 3.1k on the attack. Not really the priority, but I get some along the way. 229 on the speed, so pretty quick. 70% crit rate, that's all she needs for the Heartseeker, 70%. And 223 on the crit damage with 355 on the accuracy. Her masteries, I still run her in Flawless Execution, but I know a lot of people run her in Giant Slayer depending on your needs, and more so in the endgame. Next, I have my Tomb Lord, who's just in a perception and a defense set, just kind of whatever gear works for him. 51k on the HP, 3k on the attack, a little bit of attack, since I do have to build him with crit rate to place as many poisons as possible. 2,300 on the defense, 251 on the speed, full crit rate, again for the poisons, a little bit of crit damage, and 358 on the accuracy. His masteries are all the way down to Giant Slayer with Master Hexer, as you'd expect, because we want to extend those poisons. Up next, we do have Dark Kale here in a Relentless set and Perception. Total stats here, 43k on the HP, 3k attack, not really the priority, but again, he's just attack-based, so it scales up decently. 2,600 on the defense, 241 on the speed, so very quick. Full crit rate, because he does need that to extend debuffs on the A2, and 371 on the accuracy. His masteries are as follows, pretty much the same as Tomb Lord, all the way down to Giant Slayer, triple hitter on the A1, and Master Hexer to extend the duration of his poisons. Next, we have the Queen of Turn Meter Control, who's kind of in nothing at the moment, a little bit of perception, but I was able to get the stats that I needed for most of the content. And eventually, I'd like her in a Relentless set for Dark Fae, but that's not really too important. I have her in Blood Shield as well because of the Scarab King. I still use an old school Turn Meter Control team for Scarab King. So on the HP, 3,800, 1,800 on the defense, relatively low. For Dark Fae, I don't want her too tanky. I want her to die relatively easily, so I didn't build her stats that well. 251 on the speed, full crit rate. Again, she needs crit rate just to Turn Meter Control in the A1, so it's not about the crit damage per se, just the crit rate, and 388 on the accuracy. And lastly, we do have Vlad, the Nightborn here in a double speed and cruel set, and he's built relatively fast. We've got 33k on the HP, 4k on the attack, 239 on the speed, full crit rate, and 203 on the crit damage with 247 accuracy. He's built relatively fast, one, just because he's my debuffer for the Undead Horde Faction Wars, after the buff, I should mention. But also I need him faster than my planned build for Mashald, who's also going to be used in Faction Wars in a couple other areas. I do want to highlight once again that he is completely unbooked, and that definitely suffices for Faction Wars, even though it would be nice to have 100% chance to place decreased defense and block active skills. But my runs are down to like 2 minutes a pop just with him unbooked, and he does steal some turn meter here, particularly from like the Valkyries and or not the Valkyries, the Martyrs and stuff like that, and the Errol. So he gets enough turns, and he 75% chance is enough time for or enough of a chance for the rest of the team to do their work. So works pretty well. Mastery's incomplete. You can tell by the level he's 53, and 52 is usually where I level my champions when they need to get to masteries, and he just has a little bit of XP from literally running him in Fire Knight tests. So he's going to gain some levels from that, but masteries are incomplete. I do plan though to go all the way down to Helm Smasher because he is a nuker, and definitely get the Master Hexer as well. So if you don't have a lot of the champions that I featured in today's video, then stay tuned. We're going to talk about some potential substitutions. I'm going to keep the format the same as what we started with the last challenge tournament. So we're going to go category by category, but we do also have to break it down by each of the factions. So let's start with the nuker/DPS category. In Demon Spawn, you're kind of limited to half rack. I already highlighted my Drexthar, who's definitely built to deal some damage as well. Canderphon, of course, can do some massive amounts of damage. But for epics, you do also have Magnar, who's one of the hardest hitting HP based champions in the game. For Undead Hordes, you do have Mr. Salad here, who can definitely do a lot of AoE damage, particularly with that A1. We also have Nethril, who has a form of CC, a little bit of stuns. He's one of the enemy or one of the enemies in the wave, so you can kind of have some familiarity with his kit. But he does have a stun, so he can kind of dual purposes CC. We already talked about Vlad, who's a relatively good nuker, and now he has the AoE decreased defense, block active skills, which is really, really strong. Dark Elhain, free login reward champion. Not the best affinity for stage 20 if you're doing that, but she is a decent nuker and everyone has her, so if she's your only one, then she can definitely work. And Husk, of course, enemy max HP hit. If you happen to have him and you don't have a Cold Heart or something like that, he can definitely do some work on stage 20. For the Dark Elves, we have a lot of different nukers you can choose from. You have Ray, who has an AoE on all abilities and hits ridiculously hard with most of them. Maybe not the A1. We have Foley, known for the block revive, not the hardest hitting nuker, but if he's all you have, he can work. Xavier, who I wish I had. Poison Explosion could actually work quite well if you have the right champions for this composition here. With her and Kymar and Tomb Lord and Renegade, you can, or not Renegade, but with her and Tomb Lord and Calvalax and stuff like that, you can actually make a full corrupted Poison Explosion team that could do stage 25 in like a minute. So with the lore, so it'd actually be pretty impressive if you're lucky enough to have all those champions. But I digress. Next, we do have Marinix, previous fusion, who can hit relatively hard, places Hex and shoots synergize well with Mithrala as well. We have Ruel, who we featured, and Ultan of the Shell, somewhat recent champion who hits okay, but he also does have the sleep, so he can do a little bit of CC. For the epics, we do have Durandil, who I've heard hits relatively hard. Haven't really tested him myself, and I don't have him actually, so I can't test him. And Luria hits relatively hard, but she can also double a CC with her chance to freeze. And for Night Rev, the last faction here, we do have some nukers. We have Shemnath, who can hit pretty hard. He can remove buffs, or she, I think it's a she. She can remove buffs and hit relatively hard on champions with no buffs, so pretty good AoE nuker there. We also have Solus, one of the best defensive-based nukers in the game, if you happen to have him. Georgia, of course, who I've seen a lot of in live arena. Good God. But one of the best nukers in the game to date, and so he's more catered towards arena, to be fair, but if you're lucky enough to have him and he's your primary DPS, he can definitely do some work on the waves as well. For the epics, pretty much just down to Skullcrown as an AoE damage dealer, but honorable mention to Masquerade Monster, who can hit decently hard, provide a little bit of CC with the stun and a little bit of protection with the ally protection. The next category is Poisoners. Now, I must admit that Poison is not necessarily the best strategy for Fire Knight in general, unless you have Dark Kael and he's built on your team, just because the Fire Knight is designed to not take that many turns, therefore the poisons will never tick, and thus it's not as useful. However, if you're running some sort of poison activation team like I am, then you will want some poisoners to pair with him. So we'll talk about a few of those. In the demon spawn, there's basically only one, and it's Urticata here, who can place poisons on the A2 here on a single target. So it's not really AoE. However, she is a Hex champion, so if you pair her with Mithrala and her passive here, when an ally lands a crit on a enemy under Hex, they can place poison. So effectively, you can, with her passive, you can get AoE poisons just by having your champions crit on enemies under Hex. She can also place Hex herself, but it is a 4-time at random, which is unfortunate. Wish that was an AoE, but nonetheless, if you have her with Mithrala, then it'd be more reliable, and you can actually just turn this ability off. For the Undead Horde, we do have the infamous BEK, or Bad Alcazar, who's well known for the cleanse and poison. He doesn't attack with this, so he's not necessarily the best for Fire Knight because you do want to break the shield, but on the A1 he does have an AoE as well. But if you need the poison and the healing during the waves, he can be the guy to place them, and if you have a Zavi or something, she can blow them up. We also have Anax, who's more of an honorable mention, but he does have he hits really hard, to be fair, for like Demon Lord Clan Boss and stuff like that. He decreases defense and weaken. He's all single target, but he does have a 2-hitter here that can place poisons for 3 turns each on a 3-turn cooldown, so he can permanently keep poisons on the boss if you need it, and again, if you have some sort of activator. But he also does have a double hitter on the A1, so he can help break the shield. For Dark Elves, we do have Nock the Paralyzer, who can place some poisons, and he also places poisons once they wake up from the sleep on that same ability. We also have Supreme Kale, get the mixed up. We have Supreme Kale, who has the AoE poisons that cannot be resisted if you happen to have him. And of course, we have the OG Mr. Kale himself, and this is more for those in the early mid game. He's still a good AoE nuker if he's built that way, or maybe he's your campaign farmer or whatever. But he also does have the 4-hitter on the A3. So if you turn that off and save it for the Fire Knight shield, that's 4 hits off the shield, which can be a massive help for breaking that down, more so in the early game. And lastly, for Night Rev, we have Narma the Returned, who has some poison sensitivity and some poisons, but she's kind of like a glorified frozen banshee, so she's not really something I'd recommend overall. We talked about Tomb Lord, he's in my team. Theodore, of course, is well known for this ability here. We can place poison sensitivity and poison on all enemies, as well as activate some of them, or like activate 1 turn of them, but also activate HP burn. So if you pair him with the burner, you kind of get dual purpose there, and he can basically just smash through the waves if you have 1 or multiple copies of him, and he also works well with HP burners to activate those. If once again you're going more of the poison explosion route and you happen to have all the champions, then Kavlax is your man with this passive where he can place 4 poisons at the start of every round, and so that's just a massive quick setup for poison explosion, just because you start the wave with 4 poisons on all enemies, which makes it a lot easier to blow up. And Dark Kale can extend them, make them 3-turn duration or 4-turn if you have Master Hexer, and it's very, very easy to blow them up from there. Honorable mention to Walking Tomb Drang, a previous Fragment Summon champion, because he does have the irresistible HP burn. So if you wanted a more HP burn type strategy, and he can also activate them on the A1. So again, this is a way. HP burn itself is not good on the boss because he's designed to not take as many turns. But if you have a way to activate him, like Walking Tomb Drang does have on his A1, then you can kind of just put the burns on him and activate them and tick down his HP. So honorable mention there. Next up, we have the debuffer category, and believe it or not, that Sissy of Flametongue, in addition to activating and placing HP burn, she can also place decreased defense and weaken on a 3-turn cooldown. Other than that, you do have in the Demon Spawn Gorlos Helma, who has decreased defense AoE on a 3-turn cooldown as well. For the Undead Horde, it's actually only buffed Vlad who has an AoE decreased defense, so we've already talked about him a couple times. For the Dark Elves, you do have Lydia, of course, who I used. You do have Ghostborn, who has the irresistible decreased defense, so he's very, very solid for reliability. And if all else fails, you do have Madame Saris, who's more for arena, but she does nonetheless have decreased defense and decreased attack on her A3. And lastly, for the Night Revs, we already talked about Tomb Lord, who's also a debuffer, but Thylacia can definitely work too. AoE, AoE decreased defense on a 3-turn cooldown, and she can also extend the duration of all debuffs, which again works really well for those poison type comps, so you can extend the poisons. She can also place Hex when she attacks enemies under decreased defense, so you can get a little bit of Hex energy if you don't have Mithrala yet. The last category is supports, and for this we're going to combine kind of healers, revivers, protectors, and CC champions all together. It depends who you have and who you might need. So starting off with Demon Spawn, of course, Prince Kaimar, if you have him, AoE Sleep for the CC CC and the full reset on the cooldowns of your ability or your champion's abilities. So very, very good for the speedrun type compositions. Honorable mention to Countess Licks, because she does have block active skills and decreased speed, which can be relatively useful, and I think a double hitter on the A1, which you like for the shield. Wither the Crowned, one of the best healers in the game. I think she only has a single hitter on her A1, but again, if you need the support, she can definitely be that for you. Duchess, of course, can be the 100% success rate chance for your team. She does slow it down with her animations, to be fair, but she does have a double hitter on the A1, which is again nice for the shield. If you want to go the more block damage route, you do have Helicath, a previous fusion. He also has a double hitter on the A1, again good for the shield, but he can just block the damage and place the shield and increase defense and all that stuff that he does really well. So he can kind of protect your team. For the epics, you do have Achak the Wanderin, who can AoE freeze, which is a decent form of CC. You have Dur the Hunger, who's kind of like a super baby Duchess as far as just reviving and healing. And honorable mention to the underrated Skimfos, who is kind of under the radar, but he does have a full turn meter steal on his A3 here on a 3-turn cooldown. But if you do that at the right time, you can basically go back to back depending on the Fire Knight's turn meter. So if you don't have a Cold Heart yet and you do happen to have Skimfos, he can definitely work as far as turn meter control on the Fire Knight in particular. He does also have decreased speed on the A1 and AoE decreased attack on the A2. So very useful for keeping your team alive in the waves, decreased speed on the boss, as well as full turn meter steal on the A3. For the Undead Horde, we do have Crypt King Grawl, who does have some HP burn and some freeze. Again, if you just need the CC. We have Morrigan, a previous fusion, who's more of a speed up champion, but she does also have decreased speed on the A1, so she can help your team take more turns, which might be the difference between you getting one hit or two, or one turn or two turns into the Fire Knight shield, depending on your team's speeds. Of course, if you have a Siphi, again, she could be one of those win condition type champions who will keep your team alive and heal with the A1 and all the buffs and whatnot. And for the epics, Gorgrab can also be a healer, reviver, increase attack, turn meter fill. And in a similar vein, Seeker, increase attack, turn meter fill, just can keep your team running quickly, again, so you can do more damage into the Fire Knight shield. For the Dark Elves, we should start with Lanicus the Chosen. If you're having trouble getting the shield down, then the ally attack can definitely be the way to do that. Blind Seer. Where's Blind Seer? Blind Seer, somewhat underrated, I would think, but she does have a pretty good chance to decrease turn meter on the A1, up to 40% chance, 15 and 3 times at random, which on the boss is only one target. So triple hitter on the A1, revive here for all dead allies and puts them under block damage if they do happen to go down, as well as putting block debuffs and a big shield to protect your team. So really solid champion and uniquely suited somewhat for Fire Knight. Of course, we also have Visix the Unbowed, who does have a double hitter on the A1 that can steal turn meter, so it's similar to Skimfos, not full turn meter steal, but again, stealing the turn meter versus just decreasing it. And she also has decreased speed in her kit, so that can work to place, she can be your decreased speed champion, and she's daily login reward, so if you played long enough, you definitely do have her. Honorable mention to Tramari, if you do happen to have her, she can be some AoE stun, so a little bit of CC. She can also full cleanse with some turn meter fill, and she can place decreased speed again, which is useful on the Fire Knight himself. For the epics, Caden, again, if you need a reviver, he can be a reviver, 4-turn cooldown, revives 2 random allies with half HP and increased defense, so they won't just fall back down and die again. As well as Sylar, who's really good in a stun set because she has AoE on the A1 and AoE on the A2, as well as a massive turn meter drop and decreased speed. So again, if you need that speed control on the Fire Knight himself, she can be that champion with the stun set and CC, and the stun set can help her CC the waves to help you get to the Fire Knight. So pretty decent budget CC champion there. And lastly, for Night Revs, we do have a couple of champions to mention here. Rector, again, if you need a reviver to keep your team alive, she can heal, but she will slow down your runs with her passive when allies are under a veil, so be warned about that. Golden Reaper, somewhat underrated, kind of like a slightly better version of Haikatoon. She does have the turn meter fill, increased speed, and she can, like a baby reflex set on the A1, which is pretty neat, so she can reduce cooldown of an ally skill by 1 turn, and then she does have the AoE decrease attack. So if she had decreased speed, maybe she'd be a little bit better, but she's kind of worse. She's better and worse than Haikatoon, but Haikatoon is free, so definitely more recommended to build her if you happen to have a Golden Reaper. And lastly, we do have Renegade, of course, the baby Kymar with the mini reset of reducing the cooldown of ally skills by 2 turns. Alrighty, so that's going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comment section down below if you're going to participate at all and what team you're going to use, because I'm always curious what you guys come up with. Hopefully you guys get an easy group so you can snag that sweet Relentless gear. As always, if you found this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. And if you enjoyed the video, then be sure to subscribe to the channel, because we love the challenge tournaments on this channel, and there will be a lot more coming down the pipeline in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.